While pregnant, I discovered my husband was cheating on me. I found texts from his mistress, confessing love for him. The betrayal crushed me, but instead of falling apart, I decided to ruin his life. When he begged for forgiveness, it was too late. I took everything, and he was left with nothing. My name is Claire. I am 32 years old, and for the longest time, I believed in fairy tales. Or at least, I believed in the one I was living. My husband, Daniel, is 35, a man who, at one point, I thought was the very definition of love itself. I am writing this story not because I want to relive the pain, but because I need to, because there's a part of me that still needs to understand how everything fell apart so completely, so mercilessly. I remember the first time I saw Daniel. It was late autumn, and golden leaves swirled in the crisp air as I rushed across the city square, balancing a coffee in one hand and a pile of books in the other. He had been standing near a bookstore window, idly flipping through the pages of a novel, looking like something out of a dream, tall, well-dressed, with that quiet confidence that made people stop and take notice. When our eyes met, he smiled, a smile that felt like warmth on a winter morning. That was how it all began. Our love story unfolded like a fairy tale. He courted me with an old-fashioned charm that felt almost too good to be true. Candlelit dinners, surprise weekend getaways, handwritten notes slipped under my door. Every touch, every whispered confession felt sacred. "You're my forever," he would say, his fingers tracing the curve of my cheek. And I believed him. With all my heart, I believed him. The wedding was everything I had dreamed of. I still remember the scent of roses in the air, the flicker of candlelight reflecting in his eyes as we exchanged vows. Every guest whispered about how perfect we were together, how lucky we were to have found a love so rare. And I had felt lucky, so incredibly, unimaginably lucky. Then came the greatest blessing of all. The moment I saw the faint pink lines on the pregnancy test, my heart nearly burst with joy. I ran to Daniel, breathless, laughing, the test shaking in my hands. He lifted me off my feet, spinning me in circles, his laughter mingling with mine. "We're going to be parents," he had said, pressing kisses all over my face. "Our family is growing, sweetheart." I thought that moment would be the foundation of something even stronger, a bond unbreakable. But love, no matter how radiant, can sometimes hide shadows. And looking back, I realize now that the first whispers of doubt had already begun creeping in, though I ignored them. The late-night work meetings, the way his phone was suddenly always turned face down on the table, the distant look in his eyes when he thought I wasn't watching. I silenced the unease in my heart. He loved me. He had to, didn't he? It wasn't a single moment. It was a slow, creeping shift, like the faintest shadow darkening the light. At first, I told myself I was imagining things. Every marriage goes through phases, right? Stressful work weeks, late nights, distractions. But the changes in Daniel, those subtle, strange changes, were hard to ignore for long. It started with the phone. The once innocent device now seemed like a fortress. When we first got together, Daniel had no problem leaving it lying around, open and vulnerable. But now, he'd taken to carrying it everywhere, even to the bathroom. If I asked him about it, he'd flash that perfect smile of his and say, "It's just work stuff, Claire. You know how it is." At first, I believed him. It was work. After all, he had recently been promoted to a position that required more responsibility. But then came the late nights, nights that stretched on endlessly. While I lay awake in bed, watching the clock tick past midnight, he had been coming home later and later. His eyes would be bloodshot, his suit slightly disheveled, as if he'd barely had time to change. When I asked him about it, he always had an excuse ready. "Long meeting, babe. You know how it is. A lot of pressure with the new project." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him. But the unease settled in, gnawing at the edges of my thoughts. It wasn't just the late nights or the secretive phone calls, it was the way he looked at me sometimes. That flicker of distance in his eyes. Like I wasn't the woman he had married, but just someone he had to deal with. It wasn't just physical distance. It was emotional too. A coldness that hadn't been there before. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Then came the first sign that someone else might be involved. It was a simple thing. At first, almost laughable. One evening, I was sitting on the couch, flipping through a magazine, when I noticed Daniel's phone on the kitchen counter. It was facing down, just like always, but something was different this time. There was a notification, just a small one, peeking out from under the screen. New message from Ava. Ava. The name echoed in my mind like a dull thud. I had never heard of her before. My heart skipped a beat, and for a split second, I told myself it didn't matter. But my curiosity got the better of me, and before I could talk myself out of it, I picked up the phone. I knew it was a mistake the moment I unlocked it. The message was short, but it spoke volumes. I miss you. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. I froze. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of the words. My fingers trembled as I placed the phone back on the counter. I felt sick, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. How long had this been going on? Who was Ava? The questions buzzed in my head like a swarm of angry bees. But the most painful thought of all wasn't the betrayal itself, it was the realization that Daniel had been hiding this from me. The man I had trusted with everything, the man I had thought would never lie to me, had been keeping something from me all along. I sat there in the silence of our home, staring at that phone, as the weight of the truth settled in. I was married to a man who had been living a double life, and I hadn't seen it until now. I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, my thoughts spinning like a whirlwind. The message from Ava echoed in my mind, repeated, louder each time. I miss you. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. The words felt like a slap, sharp and sudden. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the text on Daniel's phone, and with it came the picture of my life shattering into pieces. I wanted to confront him immediately, to demand the truth, but something held me back. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was the desire to give him a chance to explain himself. Or maybe, deep down, I was terrified of what I might hear. I hadn't noticed how much I had been avoiding the truth until now. The signs were always there, his phone constantly hidden from view, the late hours at work, the coldness in his touch. It was almost as if I had subconsciously ignored them, hoping that things would go back to how they once were. But the message couldn't be ignored. It was a lie, written in plain sight, and I had seen it. I spent the entire night turning over the options in my head. What was I supposed to do now? What could I do? How do you confront someone you thought you knew? Someone you trusted completely, when everything you believed is suddenly a lie? By morning, I had no answers. My stomach churned with anxiety, but I knew I couldn't go on pretending everything was fine. I had to know the truth. I had to face him. Daniel came into the kitchen that morning, as if nothing had changed. He kissed me on the cheek as he passed me a cup of coffee, just like he always did. The gesture felt hollow now, like an empty routine. "Morning, babe," he said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I glanced at him, trying to gauge if he was aware that I knew, but his face remained a mask of normalcy, too perfect, too practiced. My heart raced as I fought to keep my composure. This was it, the moment I had to decide what came next. "You seem quiet this morning," Daniel said, sitting down at the kitchen table. "Is everything okay?" I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears as I stared at him. My mouth felt dry. Should I ask him about Ava right here? Right now? Should I demand an explanation? But how could I even begin to ask something like that? What if he lied again? What if I didn't even recognize the man sitting in front of me anymore? "Yeah," I forced myself to reply, my voice barely above a whisper. "Everything's fine." But everything wasn't fine. Nothing was fine. I spent the next few hours watching him as he moved around the house, going about his usual routine. His ease, his nonchalance, it infuriated me. How could he act like nothing was wrong when I was drowning in confusion and pain? Every small movement, every word he spoke, felt like a cruel reminder that I was living in the shadow of a lie. By the time he left for work, I had made up my mind. I couldn't just keep living in this fog of uncertainty. I needed to know if he was truly betraying me, and if so, I needed to confront him. I couldn't keep pretending to be blind to what was happening. I had to find out what was really going on. But as I watched him walk out the door, the weight of what I was about to do settled heavily on my chest. The thought of confronting him, of shattering everything we had built, filled me with dread. Would I be able to handle the truth? Would he break me, or would I break him? I knew that once I crossed this line, there was no turning back, and that scared me more than anything else. The day dragged on, each minute feeling like an eternity. My mind was a battlefield, part of me still trying to deny the truth, desperately holding on to the hope that there was an explanation. But another part of me knew the truth was there, buried beneath layers of deception. I couldn't run from it anymore. When Daniel walked through the door that evening, I was waiting for him. His usual greeting, a kiss on the cheek, was replaced with silence. I was no longer pretending. "Claire?" he asked, his eyebrows furrowing as he set down his briefcase. "What's going on? You've been acting strange all day." I stood up slowly, every part of me trembling, but my resolve was ironclad. This was it. No more games. No more pretending. I had to know. "I found the message," I said, my voice steady, though it felt like my heart was about to burst out of my chest. "From Ava." For a moment, there was silence between us. His eyes flashed with surprise, genuine surprise, but quickly replaced with something more guarded, something I hadn't seen in him before. "Ava?" he repeated, his voice tight. He took a step back, eyes darting toward the door, as if looking for an escape. "Claire, you don't need to lie to me anymore." "Daniel." I cut him off, my voice firm. "I saw the message. I know about her." "How long have you been seeing her? Behind my back? Behind our family's back?" The words stung as they left my mouth, each one cutting deeper than the last. It was like I could feel every moment of betrayal, every whisper of doubt, all coming crashing down at once. He was silent for a long time, his face a mixture of guilt, fear, and something else, something I couldn't quite place. Finally, he spoke, his voice quieter now, as if the weight of the truth was finally sinking in. "I never wanted you to find out like this. It wasn't supposed to be like this." "Like what?" I asked, my breath quickening. "What wasn't supposed to be like this? You didn't think I'd ever figure it out? You thought I'd just keep playing along, blind to your lies?" "I didn't want to hurt you, Claire," he said, his voice breaking ever so slightly. This isn't what I wanted. I never wanted to lose you. But you wanted her." I finished for him, the bitterness in my voice now palpable. "You wanted her, Daniel. You've been lying to me for who knows how long. You're having an affair, and you've been keeping it from me, from the life we built. You don't get to stand here and pretend like you didn't make a choice. You chose her." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of regret and shame, but his words faltered. He wanted to explain, to justify himself, but nothing he could say would ever be enough to undo the damage. "I don't know what to say," he muttered, pacing now, his hands running through his hair. "I never meant to hurt you. This just happened. Ava and it was a mistake. But it doesn't mean I don't love you, Claire. I love you. I still do. You have to believe that." The words hung in the air, heavy and meaningless. They felt like a hollow echo of everything I had once believed about him, about us. My heart was a tangled mess of emotions, hurt, anger, disappointment, but there was something else too. Something that had begun to grow inside of me over the past few hours. Something sharp, cold, and determined. I could have cried. I could have screamed. I could have begged him to stay, to make this right. But I wasn't going to be that woman. I wasn't going to beg. I straightened my back and looked him in the eye. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Daniel, but I'll make sure you regret this." He flinched, as though my words struck him like a physical blow. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice rising with panic. I didn't answer him immediately. Instead, I turned away, walking toward the window. The sun was setting outside, casting a golden glow across the room, but inside, everything felt cold. I wasn't sure if I was capable of forgiveness, but I was sure of one thing: I wasn't going to let him get away with this. Not without consequences. I mean, I said, turning back to face him with a look that felt as sharp as ice. You're going to regret this. Every single moment of it. The look on his face shifted again, this time to something I couldn't quite decipher, a mix of fear and guilt. Perhaps. Or maybe something else entirely. But I didn't care anymore. I wasn't the woman who would suffer in silence. Not this time. And with that, I knew the game had changed. The betrayal was no longer the issue. The real issue was how I was going to make him pay for it. Daniel had lost more than my trust. He had lost me, and that was something he would never be able to get back. But now, it was time for me to make sure he paid for every lie, every betrayal. I filed for divorce. It wasn't a decision I took lightly. A part of me, still holding on to the remnants of the love I once felt for him, wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was a way to fix this. But I knew the truth. There was no fixing it. His betrayal was too deep, too ingrained. And so, I made it official. I initiated the divorce proceedings, making sure that I was clear and firm about my intentions. I wasn't just ending our marriage. I was ending everything he thought he could get away with. The papers were delivered to him one afternoon. He called me, his voice trembling with desperation. Please, Claire, don't do this. I'll fix it. I swear, I'll fix it all. Just give me a chance. But I didn't need his promises anymore. They meant nothing to me. They were just more lies. More empty words. I didn't pick up the phone. Instead, I signed the papers and sent them back to the lawyer. It was done. The next part of my plan was harder, but just as necessary. I had been pregnant. I had been carrying our child. The pregnancy had been a source of joy, a symbol of our future, or at least, that's what I thought it was. But with everything that had happened, I couldn't bring a child into this world, a world built on lies, deception, and betrayal. I scheduled the abortion. I didn't want to have to explain myself to Daniel. I didn't want his tears, his pleas. This was my decision, my body, my life. I went through with it, and as I sat in the sterile, quiet room, I felt a sense of release, if not peace, then at least a kind of finality. It was over. There was no turning back now. But my revenge wasn't complete yet. I knew what I had to do to leave him truly broken. The next move was to take everything from him, the respect, the love, the admiration he had once commanded. I contacted his family, his friends, the people he cared about the most. I gave them the truth, the full truth, the pictures, the messages, the emails. I didn't just send them to his closest friends. I sent them to everyone, his colleagues, his family, even people he'd once considered acquaintances. I made sure they all knew about his affair with Ava. I made sure they knew how far back it went, how he had betrayed me, how he had lied to all of them. The fallout was immediate. His mother called him, crying, begging him to fix things. His father, typically stern and unsympathetic, left a voicemail, telling him how ashamed he was. His friends, those who had once admired him, began to distance themselves. Daniel, the charming, confident man I had once married, had now been reduced to a pariah. But it wasn't enough for me to just leave him with nothing. He needed to beg. I needed him to feel the weight of his actions, to understand the full extent of the pain he had caused. And so, I waited. It didn't take long. The night before the divorce hearing, Daniel showed up at my door. He looked different, broken, desperate. His clothes were disheveled, his face pale. He was trembling, and there was no trace of the arrogance that had once defined him, only a shell of the man he used to be. "Claire, please," he said, his voice cracking. "I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I don't know what I was thinking. Please, don't do this. I'll do anything. Anything. Just tell me what you want. I'll make it right. I swear." I looked at him, not with anger, but with a cold, indifferent detachment. He had lost the power to make me feel anything for him. His words fell on deaf ears. "I want you to feel the consequences of what you've done," I said, my voice steady, almost emotionless. "I want you to understand that you can't just walk away from this. You can't just pretend it didn't happen. And with that, I turned my back on him. I left him standing in the doorway, begging for a second chance, begging for forgiveness, his voice growing quieter as I walked away.